This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download recap is brought to you by Podscribe. Find out more at podscribe.com. This week I've got for you surveying the podcast advertising landscape, podcasters caught in copyright crossfire, the IAB podcast Upfront up and moved, and live is thriving in television. Let's get started. This Wednesday, Sounds Profitable published the first part of the advertising landscape, the largest study of podcast advertising effectiveness yet in the United States, built from a Signal Hill Insight survey of 5,000 Americans aged 18 plus. Along with the report on Thursday, Sounds Profitable partner Tom Webster published a companion article titled Podcasting, the Most Versatile Medium, which focuses on one particular slide from the report. The slide in question shows responses to the question, in the past month, how have you consumed New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelce? Overall, the responses are fairly balanced. 33% primarily listen to audio, 12% of that being exclusively audio. 38% primarily watch via video, 13% of them exclusively via video, and 29% consume equally across both formats. A quote from the article, quote, "For advertisers, this isn't just interesting data. It's a revelation about audience behavior that creates unique opportunities. Your brand messaging can seamlessly follow consumers as they transition between listening and watching, creating multiple touch points without having to buy separate campaigns across different media. It's like having your cake and eating it too, except in this metaphor, the cake is your ad budget, and eating it means not blowing it all on separate campaigns that don't talk to each other." End quote. And those campaigns, when effective, can be such an intrinsic part of a podcast that audiences don't think about it as advertising. A key finding in this Reach study is that 31% of Americans 18 plus are monthly consumers of ad-supported podcasting. The true finding remains in the negative there. 31% say they're consuming ad-supported podcasting, which means a substantive portion of the monthly podcast audience does not perceive that their podcasts have ads. Last Thursday from Ashley Carmen's Soundbite newsletter at Bloomberg. The National Music Publishers Association is ticked off at Spotify, and they're taking it out on podcasters with a wave of copyright claims filed on podcasts. Host of the podcast 70mm, Matt Kolosky, reports particularly popular episodes of the show have been removed entirely for using clips to discuss the film, such as his review of Barbie 2023. And it's not just popular shows getting notices. Austin Danger Podcast, a podcast which features several friends recording a Discord voice call to discuss the Austin Powers trilogy, averages 150 downloads per episode. Still, the creator tells Carmen she got over 40 copyright notices in the past few weeks due to music that appears in clips used. According to an email Spotify sent Kolosky, this is due to the National Music Publishers Association filing punitive podcast takedown requests in retaliation for the dismissal of a lawsuit earlier this year. As Tom Webster said in his presentation to CRS last year, it's past time for music labels and podcast platforms to sit down and figure out how to crack the question of music and podcasting. Looking to YouTube, one can see a thriving scene of music discussion, review, and creation. And what little music-based content there is in the world of podcasting finds huge audiences. There is an underserved niche when it comes to music and music-adjacent content, but podcasting is in a tricky position when it comes to broadcast copyright issues. The same clips that would fly under fair use doctrine on a YouTube channel are enough to nuke an entire episode on Spotify. By the way, a quick reminder to download listeners out there who are employees of Sounds Profitable partner companies. You are eligible to read the Soundbite newsletter with a 33% discount subscribing to Bloomberg. All you have to do is give us a quick email to find out more. This Monday from Inside Audio Marketing, 2025 is the year the podcast Upfront is going back to its roots. Since 2021, the podcast Upfront has taken place in May next to the IAB New Fronts. This year, it's been scheduled for September 30th, following the event back into the fall like the first 6 years the Upfront existed. A representative tells Inside Audio Marketing the decision helps meet the scheduling needs and preferences of podcast producers and ad buyers. The Upfront has also been the venue at which an annual IAB podcast advertising report is debuted, though a 2025 edition of the report has not been announced. It's also not clear who is participating in this September edition of the Upfront. This Tuesday, Nielsen published their latest edition of The Gauge, which tracks TV usage in the past month. The March edition shows the annual NCAA March Madness basketball tournament was a significant contributor to cable TV, taking up 24% of total view time. Streaming remains the biggest slice of the pie, with 43.8%. Of the big streamers, Max from HBO, Discovery, Warner saw the greatest month-over-month increase in viewership thanks to the third season of The White Lotus, climbing to the 4th place of top streaming programs overall. What the business of podcasting can take away from these cable and streaming stats is the power of quote-unquote live content, be it actual live content in the form of sports or week-to-week releases keeping IP relevant over time. Consider the steady ramp-up of marketing and social media attention medical drama The Pit saw over the final weeks of its 15-episode weekly season. While there was existing hype for a new Noah Wiley-fronted medical drama back when the show dropped in the first place, a true fandom blossomed over the back half of the show. Take it from me, somebody who liked a couple of actor interviews, and now my TikTok feed is saturated with Dr. Robbie thirst trap edits. Finally, it's time for my quick hits. These are articles that didn't quite make the cut for full coverage in today's episode, but I still think are worth including in your weekend reading. This week I've got for you, with just 5 weeks left to go until the Podcast Show London event, the Podcast Show has published their full lineup of 150 speakers, including presentations from newly announced partner companies YouTube and Goalhanger. While I was in Chicago for Evolutions by Podcast Movement, I interviewed Mike Wright and Jason Moore, 2 of the 3 hosts of the Fantasy Footballers, to discuss a decade of podcasting and how things have changed in their show with their new Sirius XM partnership. Magellan AI has announced a strategic partnership with Canadian national broadcaster CBC to track cross-show listener behavior and measure promotional campaign performance with Magellan AI's pod-to-pod attribution tech. Edison Research and SiriusXM Media have released early info from an upcoming women's audio report, which debuts Tuesday, April 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And finally, Acast is expanding their sports offering with a new exclusive podcast deal signed with the New York Times sports company, The Athletic. That was The Download, brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know I went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article I mentioned right in your podcast listening app or at the download section of soundsprofitable.com. Thank you for sticking with me as I brought you all the top stories you might have missed this week. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. Special thanks to you for joining us. Robot.
Download complete.